Hi there guys, in this video we will learn about real-time events or WebSockets in Weweb and Xano. The biggest advantage of having real-time events built into your app is your app will be able to communicate with your backend without having to refresh your screen or without having to run a loop in the user's browser to get new data. So the biggest example I can show is right on your screen right now. It's the live scores of a football match. Americans call it soccer. I don't know why anybody would do that, but we're gonna just call it football, right? So if you want to build an app that reports the real-time updates, you don't want your user to refresh the screen every time, right? They would just keep the screen open, and whenever a team scores, let's say for example PSG here scores, without having to refresh the screen, user should be able to see that score go up, right? So that is where sockets come in. Sockets are like a persistent connection with your backend, so that whenever you want to send some data to your front end, you can just push it and the user will receive that data and they can just show it in the front end without having to refresh. Or in other cases, developers also use something called polling, which means they use a loop to constantly contact backend and check if there is any new data updates. And yeah, it's a mess. Having sockets is like a blessing for apps or use cases like this, where you can update the front end or you can send data to backend, but normally in most cases this is used for updating the front end with some updated data. So in this tutorial what we're going to learn is we will learn how to configure a real-time WebSocket in Xano, and we will learn how to bring it onto Weweb and update data in our front end. All right, so the very first thing you need to do to enable WebSocket in Xano is you need to go to your dashboard, open your workspace, then go to this three dots, and here you should see real-time settings, right? So you need to click real-time settings and you need to enable real-time status. All right, if it's the first time you are enabling this, it will take some time because Xano has to allocate resources for real-time systems to start working in your instance. So give it some time, and after that you will get something called a connection hash. So this is like a security string which you should give Weweb, and that's how Weweb can connect with your Xano instance through WebSockets. If you give this to everybody, then everybody can contact your socket, so it's not really safe. So how can we use this connection hash and connect Weweb and Xano? So to do this, we can copy this connection hash by clicking on this copy button, and let's head back to Weweb. And here in Weweb there is plugins option, so let's go to plugins, and I am assuming you guys are using Xano. If you're not using Xano, then this tutorial doesn't really make sense to you, but you should just go to Xano and finish your initial configuration. All right, I showed this in a detailed video I think two weeks ago. I showed you how to connect Xano. Make sure you connect Xano, and once you connect Xano, under configuration, if you just click on it, here you can see there is an option to enter real-time connection hash. All right, so I am going to paste whatever connection hash Xano has provided me, and I'm going to click on continue. So once you click on continue, if this loading phase completes and you see a screen like this, that means the connection is established the right way, and you should not give this connection hash to everybody else, right? So here you should keep this as a secret. Only Weweb should know that. Okay, now a connection is established. Second step is you need to define something called a channel in Xano so that you can communicate back and forth from your Xano instance to Weweb and from Weweb to Xano. So you need to create this thing called channels in the same space where you copied your connection hash. So to create a channel, right below connection, you can see channels. Let's create a channel by clicking on add channel. And we are going to give our channel a name. So let's just call it score. That's the name we are going to call for this channel here, score. And right below that, there is something called nested channels. I highly recommend enabling this, because by enabling this, you'll be able to create dynamic channels. What does that mean? Maybe your app shows scores of all the matches across the globe, all the football matches, right? So in that case, you will need channels for each match. So this match is Barcelona versus PSG. You need a channel for that. Then you need to create another channel for Real Madrid versus Manchester City. You know, for different matches, you have to create different channels. It is not practical. So what we recommend you do is use nested channels. When you use nested channels, you can basically create channel names like this. Say, for example, you have a match between Barcelona and PSG, right? So the channel name would be PSG or FCB, that is Football Club Barcelona versus PSG. You can create channels like this dynamically, all right? So that is why enabling nested channels is important. Most of you would be using nested channels. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's go down and look at permissions. So permissions, anonymous clients. This is important if you want to show the results or data, or if you want to give access to clients that are not logged in to your app, right? Most of the cases will be handling users that are not logged in when it comes to Socket. So we will be enabling it, but depending on your use cases, you may choose to enable or disable it. Presence basically measures it's basically counting how many people are listening to this channel. If you're confused about what listening is, we will clear that up in a minute or two. So basically, when you create a channel, people need to subscribe to that channel, or they need to listen to that channel to receive messages. So just by you having a channel, that's not enough. People should actually locate that channel and start listening to that channel so that they can take data from that channel. So presence basically measures how many people are listening to information from that channel. So if you enable that, you can count that. Client public messaging. This is basically, it allows client initiated messaging to public channels. So client can send messages to Xano. This can be enabled if you want to send data from Weweb to Xano. In my use case, I don't really need that. Next is client authenticated messaging. This is enabled if you want your Weweb customer or visitor, they should be logged in. And client private messaging, this is for enabling clients to message to each other. So if you have a chat room or something, if you want to enable messaging between clients, you can enable this. In our case, we just need these two. And message history, this is for to measure or to keep track of all the messages that are sent and received through the channel. Next is channel trigger. We don't really need triggers right now. It will be it's an advanced topic, so we will just leave that and click on save. So we just created a channel named score. All right, now we can create any number of nested channels with this. So we can create score / Barcelona versus PSG, score / France versus Argentina, the World Cup, right? So you can create any number of nested channels because we are using something called dynamic nested channels. Okay, so now that the channels are created, it's time to move to the next step. And that next step is to start listening to this channel. So remember, a minute or two ago I mentioned just by creating channels or just creating channels is not enough. Your front end should start listening to that channel so that you can start sending data to your front end. All right. So how can we start listening to this channel? Very simple. I have built a toggle here. So if I enable or disable this toggle, if you look at my logs here, you can see if I enable, it's just, reporting back the value of that toggle. If it's off, it's false. Let's open our workflow that controls this toggle. So if I just clicked on this toggle and opened the workflow, I'm going to remove that log thing. All right. So, oops, delete. Okay. So if that toggle is turned on, what I want to do is I want to open a channel. So here you can see under Xano, you can see real-time open channel. I'm going to do that. And here, channel name, you need to supply that as text. So this can be dynamic. Like when you build more complex apps, you will be using dynamic variables to open channels. But for now, we are just going to open score/FCB versus PSG. FCB means Football Club Barcelona, right? So I'm just making this channel dynamically. Score is the name of our main channel, right? So if I go to real-time settings, score is the name of our main channel, and we are creating a dynamic channel or a nested channel inside it called FCB versus VPSG. All right, so this is the channel which we are creating, and we are just opening this channel. And if the toggle is turned off, then what I want to do is I want to close the same channel. So channel name FCB versus PSG. So if this toggle is turned on, what happens? My workflow will open a channel and it will listen to events from this channel here. And if that toggle is turned off, it will close the set channel. Okay. Now we've basically built a toggle switch that will enable and disable channel, but it doesn't really change anything. We still have to receive data from Xano and show things here, right? So for that, we need to either create a Xano function or an API. So what we're going to do is we'll just create an API endpoint. All right. I am going to call it score test and save. All right. So this is a simple endpoint. Doesn't really do anything right now. We are going to add a response, and that response would be real-time event. All right. And the channel. So here you have to specify the channel. So what channel are we subscribing to on the front end? We are subscribing to score/FCB VPSG, right? FC Barcelona versus PSG. And the data can be anything. I can send something like hello from Xano. All right. I can just send that. Authentication. This has to be used if you are building a real-time channel which requires authentication for access, right? For us, this can be accessed by anybody, so we will just skip that. I'm going to save and let's just publish it. I am going to click on run and debug. I'm going to click on run and let's see if anything happens here. Nothing really happens. Why is that? Because we haven't configured Weweb to listen to Websocket events, right? So how can we configure Weweb to do that? So let's go ahead and add a workflow which will run whenever there is an event coming into this channel here. All right. So what we're going to do is we will click on, you can do this either at the app level or at the page level. I'm going to do this at the page level. So here, if you go to this page, you can see trigger page workflows, right? And by default it would be empty. So trigger page workflows, this means these are workflows that you can define at a page level. You can also do that at an app level by going to more, but for this use case, just page workflow is fine. We're going to click on new, and I'm going to name it Websocket event. That's what I'm going to call this workflow. And every workflow needs to have a trigger. That is the event which will fire off or start the workflow. So on page load, that is not the event we want. What we want is on real-time events or on real-time message. We are just going to stick with on real-time all events, right? And here we have to supply the channel name. So the channel name which we are using here is score FCB versus PSG. So we are going to listen to that. And for now, what I'm going to do is, before I even update my my UI, I just want to see if I can successfully send and receive data from Xano to Weweb. So let's just log whatever is coming out of this real-time event. So real-time event, and the data to display will be from this event section on real-time events. We'll just select event so we can see the entire thing. Okay, now I have added it, and I'm going to close it. I'm going to close this one as well. Okay, I'm going to refresh. Now let's try sending data again, and boom, nothing really happened. The reason for that is we didn't start listening. Remember, I told you just by having a socket or sending data is not enough. Your front end should start listening to that socket, right? So that's why we build this toggle. So if we enable this, we have started listening, right? Now, if I send data, here you can see we are receiving a real-time event. So here you can see if I open data and under payload, here you can see hello from Xano. How cool is that? So if you disable this, and let me clear the log and send data, nothing happens. Why? Because we are not listening. But if we enable this, clear the log and send some data, you can see we just received real-time event. So we need to make sure this channel is opened. You can either use a toggle for this, or you can build a workflow on page load to basically listen to that channel. All right, so use this or build this however you want. Based on your app's use case, these things change, but I just want to show you it's very important to have your app listen to that channel before you can send and receive events. Okay, so now that we've established that we can send and receive events, let's now try to update our UI real time. All right, so we have Barcelona and PSG facing head to head. So we are going to bind these score numbers to a variable. So let's create a variable. I'm going to create the first variable, Barcelona score, and the type would be, can either be text or number, doesn't really matter in my use case. If you are building this app at scale, you wouldn't do something like this. All right, this would be home side score, away side score, but to keep things simple, I'm just gonna call it Barcelona score, and the default value would be just 0. Okay, so that's what we have, and we will also duplicate this. We are going to go for PSG score. All right, and the value will be 0 for this as well. Now we are going to bind this variable data to these scoreboards here. So I'm going to switch to my edit mode. Let's bind Barcelona score to this. Let's bind PSG score to this. Okay, so every time the score from Barcelona changes, we will update this Barcelona score variable, and if PSG scores, we will update the PSG score variable. All right. Okay, now let's turn off this WebSocket. Now we are going to format our data from Xano so that our Weweb instance can parse through the data and understand if it's Xano, if it's PSG who scored or FC Barcelona who scores. All right. So I am going to change this from data to an object, and I'm going to set scored by PSG. All right. So we're telling, okay, who scored? PSG scored. And new score. Oops. New score is, let's just update it to 1. All right. Let's just enable this and run a test. See if our front end received it. All right. Payload data scored by PSG. New score is 1. All right. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we are going to edit our workflow which handles that request, right? So here we're going to add an action, and that action will be, you can either use true or false or multi-option split. And here under multi-option split, what we are going to do is we are going to define a condition, and the condition will be we need to select or get the data. I don't have any sample payload to define which element to listen to. So what I need to do is I'll just select payload here for now, but payload is null. Even if I send a test something, let me see if I am listening. Yes, I'm listening. Even if I send a, let me just send a test now. All right. Just send a test, and we just received this payload, right? Even if I did this, if I go to this multi-option split, I still don't see that data inside payload. So I have to map this manually. How can I map this manually? It's not that hard. What I suggest you guys do is just open up a notepad or something and just copy this. All right, just copy this, and here you can see the mapping: event, question mark, and a dot, then data. So event data, and inside data you are looking for payload, right? Payload. So what are we looking inside payload? We are again looking for another data, right? So we are going to type that in, and then we also need to look at scored by, right? Scored by, we are going to look at that. So I hope, or I wish Weweb fix this, so we can see our sample payload when it happens, so that we can easily map it. All right. So right now this is kind of useless. Okay. Now if you paste this in here, you can see it is current value is undefined because the value that is being sent from real time is not really populating. Now the branches. What are the branches? We just need 2 branches. Either PSG will score. All right. PSG will score, or FCB Barcelona will score. All right, let me get rid of the third leg. Okay, so PSG scores, FCB scores. Now what should we do when PSG scores? We are going to update a variable, change variable value, and we are going to select PSG score, and we are going to map this data again. We are unable to select that, right? So what we're going to do, we'll use that notepad trick again. So scored by, instead of scored by, we will look for new score. All right, now that I think about it, I think we will have to change the type of that variable to decimal or number. We will figure that out. Okay, so we entered that. That's the new value gonna be. And if it's Barcelona who is gonna score, we will do the same. We will update Barcelona's score, and we will just update Barcelona score. Okay, now just to be safe, we are going to change the variable types from text to numbers, because we are sending numbers. Okay, now let's go ahead and run a test here. There you go. We just updated our new score to PSG, right? So what just happened? We are sending a data that looks like this: scored by PSG, new score is 1. If the new score is, let's say, Mbappe, oh, Mbappe left. Well, someone new was on form and they scored 2 goals in succession. And here you can see, without polling, we are updating our front end. How cool is that? Now, what is happening? Let me just explain by going to our workflow again. So real time, when this happens, you don't have to log, but still we are looking at this variable here. We are looking at our payload, and we are checking if it's PSG who scored or FCB who is scored. All right. And if PSG scores, we update that variable. If Barcelona scores, we update that variable. Very simple. Now, from the server side, if you decide, actually, you know what? Let me just show this side by side. All right. So now we are showing this side by side. Let's say instead of PSG, FCB scored, and now you want to update their score to 2. Now, if I run this, here you can see it instantly changes. There's no need to constantly poll or run a loop, any of that. So that is how sockets or real-time events work in Weweb and Xano. Hope this tutorial was helpful. Thank you so much. If you can like and subscribe to this channel, that would be super helpful. This is Abby from Republic of No Code. Speak to you in the next video.